Portland is the only big city in the country without police body cams. Seems like something activists would want, right? Well, not necessarily.
But what we do know is that it doesn't lead to less officer-involved uses of force.
Well, let's check in with another sizable city in Oregon to see how their body cam program is working.
I can't imagine having an organization down here without them. And I think that at some point we'll probably look back and Portland will be in that same position.
I hate spam calls as much as the next person, but if you're waiting for a vaccine, you might want to answer that unknown number, because it could be your appointment calling. Here's the story.
It's not always the car warranty, guys. Sometimes it is something important. Hey, thanks for being with us. I'm Dan Haggerty. This is the story. All the ways to reach out and talk to us at the bottom of your screen. Use that hashtag HeyDan on Twitter. Send us an email at thestory@kgw.com. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram and all kind of stuff. We're here for you. Now, we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about police accountability tonight. It's been a pretty big conversation, as you know, over the past year, especially here, right, in Portland. We had protests for months calling for that very thing. But I want to start with a case that happened before all those protests, and you're probably familiar with it. We talked about it on the show last week, in fact. Here's a quick refresher. We're going to show you. This is Michael Fesser. Back in 2015, he worked at a towing company in southeast Portland. He felt racial discrimination there from his coworkers, so he reported that to his boss, and his boss then became afraid of a lawsuit, so he asked his friend, who happened to be the police chief in West Lynn, for help. According to an investigation, Chief Terry Timius ordered some of his officers to create a fake criminal case against Fesser. They accused him of stealing from his workplace, which didn't happen. Again, all of this completely made up. In 2017, West Lynn and Portland police surrounded Fesser's SUV and they arrested him as he was heading home for work. The charges eventually got dropped because prosecutors took a look at this thing and realized this is all made up. Fesser then sued West Lynn PD and got a settlement of $600,000 last year. Now, after all of this became public, it's been a very big story for a long time. A lot of different agencies then opened investigations into what happened, including Portland's independent police review, since 7 PPB officers were involved in Fesser's arrest. They spent about a year investigating this and determined this week that none of the Portland police officers did anything wrong. They weren't involved in this plot to come up with fake charges. They were just called in to assist West Lynn PD with Fesser's arrest, which is actually very common to do. However, the police review did say this, quote, "We identified broader issues with these practices and recommend that the Police Bureau develop a policy that requires more due diligence for evaluating requests for assistance from other law enforcement agencies to avoid becoming complicit in flawed investigations and possible misconduct by other agencies." Now that brings us into tonight's big story, because there is one big, huge piece of evidence that the investigators did not have in the Michael Fesser case, or really any case in the city of Portland involving Portland police, and that's body camera video. Now, last month, Kyle Aboshi found out that Portland is actually the only large city in the country where the officers don't wear these things. Both the Police Bureau and the union, they say, hey, we want the cameras. Problem is, they just cost too much. So this time, Kyle went straight to the people who could make that funding happen, the Portland City Council.
For months last summer, thousands of people in Portland and around the country rallied for racial justice. They wanted police to be held accountable and demanded change, which got me thinking about police reform and why Portland Police doesn't have body cams. I checked every big city police department and found of the top 75, Portland is the only agency that doesn't have body-worn cameras. In February, we spoke with community activists and Portland Police about it. Would you like to have body cams?
We would.
And a deeper dive into the city's history found, over the years, both money and politics has gotten in the way. Portland Police's body cam pilot project ended up on the chopping block, which is where we are now.
So is funding really the barrier?
At this point, it really is, yes.
So the next step was to reach out to every city commissioner and the mayor to find out if they support body-worn cameras. And responses were mixed. According to his staff, Mayor Wheeler supports police use of body cameras because they can improve transparency, facilitate investigations, and hold both police and criminals accountable.
I think there are
Wheeler delayed plans for a body camera pilot program last year because of city budget constraints due to the pandemic, but promised to revisit the use of body cameras when financial conditions permit. Commissioner Mingus Mapps explained body cameras are worth looking into. Mapps wanted more information, as did Commissioner Dan Ryan, who inquired about the cost. Portland Police estimates it'll cost roughly $2.9 million to get a body-worn camera program up and running, with ongoing costs of about $1.8 million a year. Commissioner Carmen Rubio said, "I'm not convinced that a significant investment in body cameras is among the highest city priorities, given the budget." The strongest critic of police body cams was Commissioner Joanne Hardesty, who said, "I am reluctant to make an expensive investment in body-worn cameras because they have failed to provide accountability to other police departments and have not reduced police use of force." Hardesty pointed to research compiled by Campaign Zero, an organization dedicated to ending police brutality, which has cautioned cities against adopting new body camera programs.
There might be benefits to body cameras. We don't know what they are from the research, but what we do know is that it doesn't lead to less officer-involved uses of force.
DeRay Mackison, co-founder of Campaign Zero, explained the effects of body-worn cameras are likely smaller than many had hoped for.
That cameras are not the panacea. Cameras won't be the silver bullet. That the rest of the system actually has to move and change too.
Body cams alone won't solve the complex problems of police violence or racial injustice. The question is, will they help? And for city leaders, are these cameras worth the cost?
Okay, Kyle Aboshi joining us now. Kyle, let's take a look at some viewer comments. We got a ton after the first story you filed on this topic. I know we're going to get some more now, but there was one early on that really I found interesting. I want to ask you about it now. It comes from a viewer named Duncan, and Duncan asked, in regard to the cost for the police body cams, it was mentioned that there was a high yearly cost for the storage of the videos, and Duncan wonders, why not store the videos on YouTube? It's kind of a question I didn't really consider before, but it is interesting.
It is. Very interesting idea. Important to remember, though, this is evidence. So police have to ensure that it's preserved, not tampered with, and really only certain people can have access so it doesn't compromise a case or an investigation. Plus, remember, there is a whole lot of video that has to be saved. That's why secure data storage is really so important and ultimately so expensive. Duncan mentioned the cost, and we asked Portland Police about the cost of data storage alone. Specifically, could they break that out? They said it's about half the annual cost of a program, which would be about $900,000 a year, again, just for the data storage part of this.
Right. Okay, Kyle Aboshi. And by the way, folks at home, keep those questions coming, and we'll keep trying to answer them for you. Thanks, Kyle.
Now, let's stay on top of this topic for just 1 second. Before we do that, I do want to address something that was in the news today about Commissioner Joanne Hardesty, considering, her prevalence in that last piece. Today, she held a news conference to deny reports that she was involved in a minor hit-and-run crash. This all started when someone actually leaked information from a police report that supposedly named her as the suspect in that crash. But this afternoon, police clarified that Hardesty was not a suspect. Hardesty called the accusation a smear campaign, says that her car actually has been unmoved from the front of her home for months with a dead car battery. You might have questions about this. We do too. I think anybody who hears it's wondering, how did this all come to be? We're working on that, both here on the story, and we're going to have an update with the latest at 6:30, so stay tuned for that. In the meantime, why don't we focus on the topic of body cameras for a little while longer and the comments that Commissioner Hardesty has made about them. As Kyle mentioned in his story, Hardesty said, "I am reluctant to make an expensive investment in body-worn cameras because they have failed to provide accountability to other police departments and have not reduced police use of force." Now, as somebody, me, kind of on the outside looking in here, look, I'm not a lawmaker or a cop or an attorney or anything like that, but I just keep wondering myself, what am I missing here? Am I missing something? Because how can body cameras be this big waste of money, and we're the only major city in the country that's figured that out? So I decided to check in with one of the major cities in Oregon, another one aside from Portland, about their experience using body cameras, Eugene Police. They started using body cameras in 2017. And today I chatted with their chief, Chris Skinner, all about it. One of the arguments against body cameras that we've been hearing is that it doesn't bring down the use of force cases. What do you say? What do you say to that?
Well, I guess what I would say is that if you're counting on body cams to change behavior in your officers, then you need to look elsewhere. I would suggest that you put more effort into hiring the right people to begin with, and understand that body cams are one of many strategies to help build trust, legitimacy, and accountability within an organization.
So if they're not going to bring down use of force, what do they do in your day in and day out that you think are beneficial?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we found here in Eugene that body cams have done is it has just completely legitimized our complaint and internal affairs process. When you think about having video that accompanies complaints and allegations of misconduct, to be able to have our civilian review board be able to have access to body cams during the course of an investigation, and the independent auditor have access to body cams so that they can accurately classify a complaint as either an allegation of misconduct or a service complaint, has been really, really important in legitimizing that entire process.
Do you think it's worth the money? That's another one of the hurdles. They say it's so expensive to catalog and to keep all of the data that is stored from these body cameras. Is it worth it monetarily?
Yeah, I totally get that, and you know, we struggle with storage. You know, we're talking about terabytes of storage and the associated costs that go with that, as well as keeping our body cams current. I would just say it's a strategic investment that we've leaned in on, and that's really important. It's been a priority for us, and I think it should be a priority for other organizations as well. We all, as chiefs and CEOs of our organization, have to make difficult decisions about how we prioritize resources and our financial resources. And I would say that this is one that's important to prioritize. And I think what you'll see, the outcomes you will see, aside from legitimizing your complaint process, is I think it becomes very informative. It informs us on training issues that we need to have and pay attention to. We have officers watching film, just like athletes watch film on a Saturday or a Sunday or a Monday after a performance to see how they can be better. It helps inform our policies as we do that with our police commission. So there's just so many great outcomes to having body cams that it's a really, really important priority, not only in our organization, but I would be an advocate for others to think of it as that way as well.
And I don't think that there is any argument against the fact that body cams, there we go. I don't think that there's any argument that says that body cams can't be game changing in some investigations, like a situation in Eugene in 2019. Officers shot and killed a father during a domestic dispute outside of a grade school filled with kids. Okay? The public reacted like anyone would hearing a headline like that, but the officer's body camera clearly showed that the man pulled a gun, that he fired twice. It cleared the officer in that case, and it helped remove doubt from the public that the police acted too aggressively. Again, that is just one, and it is an extreme example, but no doubt a situation where it was better to have the video than otherwise. Okay, let's take a second to talk about vaccines now, right? I know we have a ton of questions about vaccines. Please keep that coming. You send them in every night, and we continue to send them to our Pat Dorris. So send them to thestory@kgw.com, and let's check in with Pat now for a few answers.
More helpful questions and comments today on the COVID vaccine beat. Let's get to it. Rodney writes in, a feel-good moment today was my wife's phone rang with suspected spam showing on her screen, and she decided to answer anyway. Turned out to be the Oregon Convention Center wanting to schedule my COVID-19 vaccine shot. Might be a good time to stop screening your calls if you signed up for your shot. Excellent point, Rodney. I had asked them, by the way, last week, hey, when you start calling people, are they going to get any sort of notification? Will it say anything on caller ID like this is Legacy calling or this is the convention center? They said, no. So you probably, if you did sign up, this would be a good time to start answering your phone. You might have to wade through some spam calls, but you don't want to miss that one that says we've got a spot for you, because they're only going to call you twice and then they'll move on. That doesn't mean you're out of the system. It just means for that one, for that day or for that hour, whatever, you're out of that part of it. And then you have to go back into the group and get randomly picked again. So don't miss those calls. Teresa asks, when those with underlying conditions are eligible to schedule the vaccine, how is that eligibility verified? It's not. They're going to believe you. They're going to trust you. If you have diabetes, heart condition, any of that sort of thing, if you say that that is your underlying condition, they're going to say, great, step on up. Let's fill out your information. They're going to take you at your word. So I hope that helps. Those are some great questions today. Please keep them coming in. That's what's going on with the COVID vaccine today.
Pat Dorris, thank you, sir. Let's do our daily count. Check in with the vaccine count. As of this afternoon, nearly 660,000 Oregonians have gotten at least their first dose. More than half of these people have gotten a second dose, but we're counting the first dose. That gives us to about 15.5% of the state's population here in Oregon with the first shot. In Washington, more than 1 million people, so I guess 1.12 million people at this point have gotten their first dose. That works out to be almost 15% of the population in Washington.
Yeah, I know, we just had an election, but apparently it's time to choose some new leaders again. First, in Oregon City, where they recalled their mayor. Then, in Northeast Portland, where a state rep just resigned. And it's March, which means we're going to spring forward soon. But didn't Oregon decide to get rid of that whole time change thing? The answer is yes, but also no, when the story continues.
Welcome back. I was just going through some of your emails and comments. Somebody saying that I say the word body weird, body cameras. Is there an accent there? How do you say it? I don't know. I think I got it right. Keep them coming. Use the hashtag HeyDan. Now, if you've been watching our show for a while, you know we've been following this whole Diego Hernandez saga, or whatever you want to call it, pretty closely. Here's a quick refresher if you're not sure. Last year, the state representative was accused of creating a hostile work environment for 3 women at the Capitol. He denied this, but investigators agreed with his accusers, and his fellow lawmakers were scheduled to vote to expel him. But instead, he announced his intent to resign last month, so he's going to be on the job until March 15th, and then he's gone. But that means that someone has to fill his seat in House District 47, which is on this map right there. It's part of Northeast Portland. Now, 4 candidates have thrown their hat into the ring. Robin Castro, who previously ran for Portland City Council, Adrian Enghouse, president of the Oregon Federation of Nurses and Health Professionals, Kaylee Tern, who works for the Oregon Department of Human Services, and Andrea Valderrama, the policy director for ACLU of Oregon. Now, she actually has a history with Hernandez. We have to mention that. Last year, she accused him of domestic violence and filed a restraining order against him. That order was later dismissed, but she told us at the time that she stood by her claims. But this isn't like an ordinary kind of election, the kind of thing you're used to. Like, if you live in House District 47, for instance, likely you're not going to get a say here. You're not going to get a vote. Only Democratic Precinct Committee persons actually get ballots, and their votes will be counted on March 15th, which is the day Hernandez is actually leaving office. But it's even stranger than that. That's not really the end of it, because their votes kind of don't count either, if it makes any sense, because Multnomah County commissioners will be the ones to choose a new state rep from the top 3 or 4 candidates from that election. And since there are only 4 candidates total, well, kind of seems like it's mostly going to be up to the commissioners. We'll let you know what decision they make. Now, there is another election coming up that you will get to vote on if you live in Oregon City, because they need to pick a new mayor. You may remember what happened last year. Mayor Dan Holliday stirred up a bit of controversy. First, in April, when the state shut down because of the pandemic, Holliday considered issuing a declaration to reopen businesses in his city. The state attorney general didn't like this at all, wasn't very happy, threatened civil or even criminal action against him unless he backed off. Then, in June, in the thick of the George Floyd protests, Holliday got a lot of backlash for some social media posts that he made. One downplayed police brutality against black people, calling it, quote, hardly an epidemic. In another, he asked why there could be protests, riots, looting, and vandalism in Portland, but no 4th of July fireworks in smaller towns. A group then started circulating a recall petition to get rid of him, and they actually got enough signatures to get it on the ballot. And in November, voters decided to give him the axe. So next week, there's a special election to fill his seat. And if you live in Oregon City, you should already have your ballot right now, actually. They're going to be due back next Tuesday, March 9th. So get on that. Here are the candidates. Rachel Lyles Smith, a current Oregon City Commissioner. Damon Mabee, a former Oregon City Commissioner. He might win, maybe. Okay. Alex Josephy, who's held some positions in the state Democratic Party, and Leslie Wright Jr., a small business owner. Again, the election is happening next Tuesday. We just got the numbers back. Only 15% of the ballots have been returned so far, so let's go, Oregon City. Get on it. Every vote counts, especially when only 15% of people are voting. So vote, and we'll let you know who gets elected and why that matters. Now, I got this question on Twitter from Carl. He said, "Hey, Dan, what's up with the time change? will it be the last time this year? So yeah, do you remember this conversation? Of course, it's almost time to spring forward, and that's when we lose that hour of sleep, and it's the worst. A lot of people have been hoping that we can just kind of get rid of that whole process and stay on one time for the entire year. And it turns out, if you feel that way, the state of Oregon as a whole agrees with you, but not enough to change anything, right? It doesn't really do anything to just have the state agree and you agree. It takes more than that. Let us explain.
Daylight savings time. Daylight saving time, right? Anyway, our annual annoying cue to spring forward or fall backward. On Sunday, March 14th, we'll be losing an hour, but gaining some more daylight in the evenings. But wait, didn't Oregon take care of this already? Don't we have some new law doing away with the time change? What's the deal, and how did we get here? In 1966, Congress passed the Uniform Time Act, establishing daylight saving time nationwide. Oregon, sly dogs that we are, we were already on board, having done the same thing 4 years prior to that. The idea to turn clocks forward 1 hour on the last Sunday in April and turn them back on the last Sunday in October. Basically, it lets humans make better use of the daylight as the sun rises and sets later and later throughout the summer. Fun fact, the official time change happens at 2 a.m., but you're asleep and don't care. Anyway, in 2005, Congress extended the daylight saving time window, scheduling us to spring forward in March and fall back in November. To be clear, all of this time, people have found these frequent shifts, well, annoying. Some states, like Arizona, don't observe daylight saving time at all. In 2019, Oregon decided to take a page out of their book, but lawmakers instead passed a bill to keep us on daylight saving time all year round. In other words, the schedule we would be using during the summer would be our schedule all year. And we're not alone. Washington and California have also passed bills and ballot measures to do the same thing. But, and this is key, none of us can actually make the switch yet. Because for that to happen, we measly West Coast dwellers need approval, you guessed it, from Congress and the president. In short, we're stuck in legislative limbo, waiting on D.C. And they're, of course, known for getting things done quickly. That was sarcasm. And that's how we got here.
Okay, we're almost done for the night. Keep sending in those comments and questions. Use the hashtag HeyDan. Jan Walker, I'm going to address yours next, and maybe a couple others. Let me read them through the commercial break, and we'll see you in just a minute. This isn't really a question. This is more of a tip that Elaine sent in just now, because we were talking about how if you get calls from the state for your vaccine appointment, it'll show up as one of those numbers that you think is going to ask you about your car warranty or something, so you don't answer it. And a lot of people, Elaine was mentioning, have settings in their phone to silence those types of spam calls, so your phone doesn't even ring, and that happened to her. So get into your phone, your iPhone or Android, and make sure that you don't have that setting to get rid of spam calls just in the meantime. Robert wrote in and said, hey Dan, can we get a new segment called Whiteboard Wednesdays? If you haven't noticed on the show, I draw stuff on whiteboards sometimes. That sounds like a good idea. What story from like Tonight's Show, for instance, would have been done on a whiteboard, though? We got to keep those ideas going. It can't just be just a whiteboard. Also, Robert Fuller had an interesting take. He said to say body cameras don't reduce the use of force complaints is like saying fingerprints have not led to a reduction in crime rate. That's not really the point. It's a piece of evidence in an investigation. It's an interesting point. And Jan Walker wondering why Commissioner Joanne Hardesty's car has not been tagged or towed since she apparently says it hasn't moved in months because of a dead car battery. It's in her driveway. They don't typically steal your car from the driveway, but that's a good question. Thanks for being with us tonight. That's the story. It's a Thursday. Let's close out the week strong tomorrow. Keep those questions coming. We'll cover the news you want to see. See you tomorrow.